Hey everyone, it's been a while since I've done one of these videos, so I just wanted to catch up and let you know what's been going on and more importantly, where have I been? Well, I actually went out to my hometown in Corsicana, Texas. The reason being, I was actually reviewing a film which I'll be talking about today, but since I've been gone for like, what, a week and a half, I'm sure you guys will probably let me know. I actually can't remember right now, but it's been about a week and a half, I think. And as a result, since I haven't really done a lot of new content lately, I decided to do a couple movie reviews for today's episode, so you actually get a little bit more for your money, even though you're not paying me anything. But so what was going on is as I mentioned before, I went to Corsicana, Texas to review a film called Warning Shot. I do film reviews for publications and such, and I was asked, well, actually, I wasn't necessarily asked, but they were down for it. I can definitely say that. I wanted to see if they'd like me to cover this film, and they were all for it. And so I went down on behalf of our local newspaper, and I went to the new theater. It's one of the first. It is the one of the first times that I've actually been to this. The old movie theater in my hometown was Cinema 4, and a little tiny theater, but that's where I saw all the great movies. But this one is one of their newer ones. It's been there for a while, but still my first time seeing it. It's called Schulman's Movie Bowl Grill, and so I went down there, and they had a nice little premiere reception, and they had some of the producers down there. Amy Ng and Spiro Dean Stamboulos were in attendance, as well as some of the local production, which I thought was pretty cool. And a lot of the footage was actually shot in my hometown, of Corsicana, Texas. So that was interesting, seeing my hometown on the big screen at a movie theater in my hometown. So that was like super weird. Majority of my film work is on the West Coast, so actually going home to see all this done was pretty cool. But ironically, the chief of police, a guy named Robert Johnson, is actually actively trying to bring a film community to Corsicana, which I think is great. And the production team for this particular film really enjoyed their experience and are wanting to do more films there, which I think is great. So the film, Warning Shot, was actually directed by Dustin Fairbanks, basically supposedly based around a real life events. They didn't get too technical as to which real life events those actually were. And it focused on a single mother by the name of Audrey, who was played by Tammy Blanchard, and her young daughter. Their grandfather died, so they inherited his farmland, but apparently he had a rival that wanted all his water rights, because the guy apparently at one point wasn't, when he was working and not such a big popular businessman, he was denied the chance to have water during a particularly grueling work shift. And so his attitude was, you know what, I'm going to buy all the water. And that's ambition for you. His grandson, played by David Spade, actually in his first dramatic role, which I think it's great for David Spade. Honestly, I do. See him branch on past Happy Madison Productions. I mean, there's really only so much growth, and he's always been playing the sarcastic guy for years and years. And it's good for him to see him get out there and try some new things. And he did all right. He did all right in the film. And, I can tell he's definitely trying to stretch out and see where he can go. And I didn't have a problem with it. They also managed to land James Earl Jones, which I thought was another great cast. James Earl Jones perennially has a great speaking voice, and I haven't seen him in a film in a while outside of Rogue One, sorry. I started mixing movies and video games together. But so he was in that as well as an executor of the will. And basically there's two storylines. There's Audrey, and then there's David Spade's character, Bobby, who is going to collect these water rights for his grandfather. And he sends out these two hired thugs. One guy was named Jawari, played by Dwight Henry. And then there was another guy named Rainey, played by Guillermo Diaz. And it was kind of interesting. I could tell they were trying to do a little bit of punchy Pulp Fiction style dialogue. Dwight Henry was actually very funny in this film, and Guillermo Diaz actually played some serious menacing. He was full on crazy, and when the two storylines met together, he actually put out some genuine menace in this film, and I was really impressed by that. But it was a standard film in the sense that it was people get captured. Obviously, they're going to get away. The real question is how they do it, and what is the end result of everything. I thought the ending was a little bit tongue in cheek and kind of funny. I don't think it was intentionally funny, but I didn't think it wasn't like a bad funny where it was. It's just in the sense of they did all this work when the end solution was just incredibly easy, and instead of even exploring that route, they made it about as incredibly complicated as possible. All in all, I felt the performances were really good. I felt the writing was well done. I think one of the biggest enjoyments of this film, outside of seeing my hometown represented in this movie, was the fact that it actually felt like it wanted to be a film and not a product. They weren't pushing anything in terms of like commercialism, no extended cinematic universe. I just felt like they were out there to tell a story, and they just wanted to make something good. And I enjoyed it for what it was. I was very impressed that, again, local films are coming to my hometown, and it was an enjoyable film at the end of the day. So, all in all, I don't believe it had a very long theatrical run. I think it was actually pretty quick. I think they did a premiere in LA, and then they actually did one in Corsicana, which I thought was super cool, because a lot of places I was like, all right, see ya, and then they never have anything to do with the actual filming location. I mean, certainly you can check it out when it releases, but they actually made a big deal of it, and I thought that was super cool. You might recognize the poster warning shot. It's on my preview image. I don't know. I think the image is kind of funny. It almost looks like one of the old Star Trek theatrical posters where everyone's head's kind of in that beam thing. And then, of course, at the bottom, they have Audrey and her daughter trying to get through, because the whole central theme about this is water rights. And yeah, I enjoyed the film for what it was. So the next film that I'm going to talk about was a documentary that I didn't get a chance to see it in the movie theater. It didn't actually come here when it released, and I was really disappointed about that, but then I saw it was on video on demand, so I got a chance to see it. That would be the documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor? The Fred Rogers story, and that was directed by Morgan Neville. So basically, it's a biopic documentary piece about the life and times of Fred Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And it was interesting to me that, from the first seconds when you start hearing the little opening chimes of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood theme, it's such a nostalgia rush. I mean, the sentiment is so deeply rooted inside. You kind of get that little sense of happy, and the whole tone of the film is very positive. That's not to say that some of the events that happened in the world around. I note how I said that. I said the events that happened in the world around. Fred Rogers kept such a positive message in his life and career. I don't see how that's possible, because he actually was what he claimed to be, what he presented to be on the television screen, and that this guy just was about as sincere and on the level as you could get. But he was honest, and he realized that there were bad things in the world. There were things that could not be easily changed. He didn't really wait for anybody to, really kind of find a way. He took the initiative to find his way to express various real world topics. He didn't talk down to kids. He had a very gentle, soft spoken tone to him in general, but he didn't talk down to kids. He explained everything from assassinations to getting along, with different people of different races, bullying, when the big superhero craze took off in the late 70s, before the real big superhero craze took off, when they were showing Superman, apparently kids were jumping out of their windows trying to fly like Superman, and he took this whole initiative and was like, look, superheroes are a work of fiction, and you can't do that in real life. But he reached out to all kinds of kids. He didn't really matter who you were or what your background was. He was so genuinely accepting of everybody, and they really played with that theme. And even at the end, you know, he retired in 2000, but he came back briefly when 9/11 happened, and because everyone looked, what would Mr. Rogers think? And that was one of his last big appearances before he passed on in 2003. But it was interesting that the end of the film was not so much asking what would Mr. Rogers do. It kind of posed the question of what do you plan to do? And I thought that was a unique take. They juxtaposed scenes with little animations of Mr. Rogers' most notable puppet, Daniel Tiger, who was supposed to be a representation of Fred Rogers himself. And it was a nice little animation. They didn't really get in any more past the legacy. They kept it all on point to Fred Rogers' life. So the film essentially ends when he's no longer there. And it talks the slightest hints of what happened after, but not really. I mean, I know there was apparently like a little animated series that came out after the fact, but they don't really touch on all that. It's basically the life of Fred Rogers, and it's very simple and it's very to the point. And if you loved Fred Rogers or you grew up with him during your childhood, this is a great and wonderful film. It's very honest, it's very meaningful and insightful, and I can't think of anything necessarily bad to say about the film. And if you're looking for something necessarily bad to say about Fred Rogers, and they did show examples, certain hate groups, certain news programs certainly had their opinion of what they believed Fred Rogers to be. And there are people out there who didn't like Fred Rogers, but looking at the sources who didn't like him, you can't really regard their thoughts in any real consideration. The next film, I actually went out, the missus and I went out to go see A House with the Clock in the Walls. I'm sorry, no, let me actually. The House with the Clock in its Walls. Sorry about that. I knew all the little various words. It was like house, clock, walls, but it is The House with the Clock in its Walls is the official title of the Jack Black, Kate Blanchett film that came out. But before that, as we're getting into fall and getting closer to Halloween, for this week only, apparently, they did a 3D presentation of Michael Jackson's Thriller video from 1982. And that was interesting in two regards. That's the first time I've ever seen that video in a theater experience. So that was news. And really, you had the sound and the big screen. And then they also put it in 3D, which they didn't add anything extra. They certainly gave the feel of the film a 3D look. They took existing unaltered footage and actually added a little bit more oomph to it. They actually got a pretty decent jump scare in there that I wasn't expecting. And, they really did some unique things with the footage, but they didn't change the footage other than making it 3D. And really, what can you say about Michael Jackson's Thriller? It's one of my favorite music videos of all time, just because it's like this 15-minute horror story. And I don't know what I was expecting in the sense of like, I had forgotten how well done that mini film is, because at the beginning you have Michael Jackson turning into like the werewolf, and then at the end all these zombies come out of the ground and Michael turns into a zombie, and there's a great big zombie, and it's scary. I mean, there's some scary parts in it. They definitely don't tone it down. I mean, obviously it's probably a hard PG-13 if it were to be classified today. And the makeup by Rick Baker was exceptional. He was the guy who did numerous films. They even gave a shout out to him with American Werewolf in London as one of the theater marquees. And of course, Vincent Price had his rap. And the makeup's on point. They don't tone it down. They don't make it kiddie. And I was kind of like looking around the audience because, for this kids film, they had a bunch of little kids in there, and I didn't know how they process, like, this thing just did not tone itself down. I mean, the makeup's gruesome and it's super cool and detailed. But at the same time, kind of hearing the audience reaction from kids, they were kind of into it until that one jump scare that they stuck in with using the 3D effects, which, I was like, oh wow, that's cool. And then you could hear like a legit scream. I mean, it wasn't like it was like movie level scream. And I was like, wow, that's kind of cool that I got to experience that. Poor kid had to suffer for my entertainment, but kids seemed hyped for it. I mean, it's just, you hear that beat and it's just such a catchy hook to it. I think Thriller is probably one of Michael Jackson's best themes. The other two would probably be Billie Jean and Smooth Criminal as some of his best like music that really gets you kind of like into the song. But again, there's just not that much to say about Thriller. It's great. I think it's only going to be playing for the first week. It's an IMAX experience. If you see it during the approximate time that this video is posted, I'd recommend going out and seeing it. It's absolutely worth it. 3D is great, but just seeing that awesome video on the big screen alone is well worth the viewing. Now, the last film I want to talk about is the actual house with the clock in its walls, and that was obviously the feature. So that it wasn't like the whole thing with episode 1 where you go and see the trailer and a bunch of people bail out and got everything they needed. But the house and the clock in the walls was an okay movie. It wasn't bad by any means. It was competent. It did what it needed to do, and I thought it was okay. One of the biggest things I think a lot of people who aren't familiar with the property are probably going to think, and they'd have every reason to, is that the house with the clock in its walls is a ripoff of Harry Potter, which is not true. The House series that came out in 1973 and was a book series, 12-book series, and focused on a boy wizard growing up in unusual circumstances and going through a series of wizarding adventures as he finds his place. Well, actually, they refer to boy wizards or boy witches as warlocks in this. The film was all right. There were a couple things that I didn't particularly care about. One of the big motivations that got the plot to that third act, I thought was kind of dumb. I thought that the kid would have been smarter, especially they present him throughout the whole film as book smart. And I know there's always that little bit of pressure. Kids desperately want to be accepted by their peers, and sometimes they'll do crazy things in order to find that acceptance. And I get it from that perspective, but as book smart as that kid was and as knowledgeable with words and studying as he was, it kind of struck me that the decision that he made to make this pseudo-ambivalent kid that had been more of his friend at the beginning of the movie really try to salvage their friendship, it wasn't a smart decision, and I'm more surprised that he would go through it just to get the approval of a guy that he was trying really hard to get along with. And I don't know, it just seemed like it kind of derailed it. They present him as smart, and he made a stupid move. And I know that was like Harry Potter, for example. He goes through and he continually defies rules, and he goes over people's heads, and he does all these, he doesn't really listen to, Harry Potter never necessarily listened to authority, except or someone like Dumbledore, and even then he would sometimes circumvent Dumbledore's wishes or things. And even then Dumbledore kind of set it up as a sort of a test to see if he'd actually pass in the first place. It didn't seem as well presented, and it didn't seem as well justified from anyone's perspective. And I think that was one of the biggest things that just bothered me about it. Otherwise, it was okay. I just don't have any major like praises for it outside of the special effects were nice. They did some cool things. Definitely loved the house. I mean, I would certainly like to own a house like that for myself. But outside of that, it felt very Harry Potter, which is unfortunate because the house with the clock in its walls came first by 24 years. So that's going to be an unfair comparison that it's going to get. Jack Black did a decent job. Jack Black has been in so many kid-friendly films lately. I think he did a fine job. He didn't do anything outstanding, but he was certainly competent. There's a scene at the end of the film that's creepy as everything, and it's the CG in this baby scene that happens toward the end is pretty laughable. It's for as good as everything else managed to look in this film. It was funny because it was such a bizarre scene, and funny because how bad the CG was in this particular moment. I think the highlight of the film was Kate Blanchett. She played the character Florence. I really liked her, and I rooted for her the most out of everybody in it. I just she's very no nonsense. She was very practical. Uh, there was a very droll feeling to her character in the sense that Jack Black's character Jonathan always credited her as the smartest of their partnership and the best at spells. She had some things that she had to work through in regards to the film, but I really liked her character. There was always a calm, cool, compassionate edge to her character, and she played it well. It was like she was having a lot of fun in the role, and I felt like out of everybody in the cast, she was the one who was probably getting the biggest kick out of being in this film, and it showed. There was another kid, Owen Vaccaro, who played Lewis, and there are good kid actors and there are good bad kid actors, and I don't think he was anything remarkable in the sense that he did a competent, average performance. He was likable enough, all things considered. Uh, the movie required his character to cry and scream fairly often, and both of those emotions he never necessarily sold me on either. Um, but again, some kid actors have it and some grow into it, and hopefully he will. But I just during the high emotional dramatic scenes, he just didn't necessarily sell me on it. I don't think he came off as very comfortable in expressing the emotions. It just seemed a little stilted. But I'm not going to be mean to the kid. The kid's a kid, so um, I have a feeling that in time he'll continue to make more films and figure it out, and we'll see where he goes from there. I don't think that the house did very well in terms of box office. I think they had a low projection for what it was going to do for its opening weekend, and it didn't even make half that, or just barely at half. So I don't know if they're going to turn this into a film franchise as Universal was probably hoping for and counting on. Harry Potter films are still going on right now with the Fantastic Beasts series, but one of the other weirdest things that at the end of the credits, like they did this weird like promo plug for Universal Studios Florida and the theme parks, and I don't know, it just seemed super weird that it wasn't anything big. It wasn't like a commercial or anything, but it was just like a weird image, like, hey kids, if you like House with the Clock in the Wall, come check out Harry Potter's Wizarding World. So yeah, it just, I don't know. It was just like really odd. And I was like, why do they have this here? So those are the 4 films that I've been watching since my absence last time. And, again, just do a quick rundown. I liked Warning Shot. I felt it was trying to tell an actual story. Won't You Be My Neighbor is a very sweet, honest, and insightful look into Fred Rogers' life. Thriller was, well, it's Thriller. How can you hate that, you monster, if you hate that film? And then The House with the Clock in Its Walls was okay. neither great, neither awful. I had no problem seeing it. There were a couple moments I was entertained. I certainly liked the set design and some of the performances. Certainly Kate Blanchett, but it was okay. Well, that's it for this video. I appreciate you checking this out later. I know for a live video, I just figured this was the best way to do this. Get all these videos into one, especially since I haven't put out anything lately. And well, thanks again for checking it out down the line, and I will talk to you that next time. Actually, I am going to go out of town yet again, about a week. So I will try to get some more content out then, but I'll be out for a couple more days and then back to my regular posting schedule once all that is said and done. All right, guys, thanks for checking this out, and I will see you then next time. Take care.